여러분 안녕하세요. Hi everyone, it's Chansung teacher again for 무궁화반. Woohoo! Are you ready for a new lesson? Today we'll be learning about 한글날. And so, let's get started. We'll be learning about 한글날, 하고 역사, 그리고 의미. We're going to be looking at 한글날 today. We'll learn about its history and also the meaning behind it. So let's get started. Long ago, before we know Korea as it was today, there was a kingdom called Joseon. Joseon was a Korean kingdom from 1392 to 1897 with rich culture and also tradition. However, life was very different back then because there was a strict social hierarchy. Because Joseon was a kingdom, there was a strict social hierarchy based on what family you were born into. There were royals, noble families, merchants, regular citizens, and also slaves. Everyone with a social status higher than a regular citizen were 양인, and the slaves were 천민. Everyone who was a noble, scholar, government worker, or also skilled workers like doctors and scholars were considered the ruling class. Everyone in this class was taught how to read and write in Hanja, which was the Korean writing system used during these days. This is a borrowed Chinese writing system because Korean language is only a spoken language at that time. Reading and writing, Hanja, was a major sign that someone had a high social status, and it was kept within these groups of people. They didn't want to teach it to people outside of this group of people. Everyone who wanted to work in government or a position of power needed to know how to write and also read Hanja, and would also need the support from someone who was already working in government. Because of this, people in this social standing was considered the ruling class with the most authority in Joseon. Everyone who was a craftsman, farmer, regular citizen, merchant, or slave was considered the non-ruling class. This was because a majority of the people in this class did not know how to read or write Hanja, nor did they have a nobility status to help them get to those high positions. Because they didn't know how to read or write, many people in this social status had difficulty having their opinions heard in the Korean government, and they suffered a lot because of the greed of the noble. They were also unable to write complaints to the king or let their complaints be known because they didn't know how to write it in paper to send to the king. This was partially solved through King Sejong or Sejongdaewang, who made a breakthrough by creating the Korean language, the written language that we know today. Sejongdaewang was born in 1387 and he became king when he was around 22 years old. He was known to create brilliant inventions with skilled people and introduce new ways to make government better. He is said to have helped make Joseon the best in its time during his reign. Though he had many achievements, he was worried because of their writing system, Hanja. Because it was so difficult to learn and it prevented everyone in his kingdom to help him rule the country, he had to come up with a way to create something that could do it. There were just too many people who couldn't read, so they didn't know what was happening whenever the government made decisions and announced it. And his answer was to come up with a whole new writing system. This writing system, which was at that time called 가갸글, was first introduced in 1443, then officially introduced in 1446 to the kingdom through a book called 훈민정음. This book was an instruction manual of how to write 가갸글 and was written so everyone, regardless of who they were, can learn to read and write. The vowels are shaped according to the shape of the sun, land, and people, while consonants were shaped according to the form your mouth makes when pronouncing each letter. The Korean letter is also credited to be one of the most scientific and brilliant languages to be created. Let's look at how these sounds were created, or these shapes were also created. First, there is the 어금니 소리, 기역, 혀 소리, which is tongue, 니은, 입술 소리, 미음 or 입소리, which is teeth sound, 시옷, sh, 목구멍 소리, 이음 or Those are the consonants, and they are very unique because they are also similar in shape based on how they look like in the mouth and on the outside view of your mouth. Now for our vowels, there is the basics, and then the 초출자, and then the 제출자. Fun fact about the vowels is that if you say all the vowels from A to E, your mouth would start from here and it will get smaller and smaller and then end with E to just show your teeth. Shall we try it together? A, ya, o, yo, o, yo, u, yu, u, e. Did you see that? This is just one example of how scientific our Korean language is. When the letters were first created, there were actually 28 letters instead of the 24 that we know today. That is because over time, the writing system became more simplified and also organized through the Korean Language Society that was created to preserve the Korean language during Japanese occupation. This was in 1918, 1933, that time. During this time, a Korean linguist, his name is Chu Shi-kyung, and he was someone who studied languages, called or renamed Kagyakul into Hangul as he helped preserve and standardize the Korean language. Hangul was created, or the name Hangul was made because Han means great and Kul means script. So Hangul literally means great script. He is the reason why we can have good grammar structures and spelling in Hangul. But what happened to the letters that we no longer use today? Out of the 28 letters, the one you see circled are the ones we no longer use today. Instead of using those letters, we actually replaced them or simplified the sound by using other letters in the Korean alphabet because they sounded similar and also had a similar purpose in writing words. Now, Korea celebrates Hanguinar every year on the day King Sejong officially introduced it to everyone in 1446, and that day is today, October 9. Korea also made it into law so that we will always remember why it was created for us and how Hangul was made. Now, because of this, a lot of people in Korea knows how to read and write. Also, Korea is known to be one of the most literate countries in the world. Now, let's see how well you remember what we learned today. I will give you some questions that go with what was mentioned today in our lesson, and you will have 10 seconds to answer the question before I give you the answer. Are you ready? Let's go! When is Hangunar? I'll give you 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Were you able to choose your answer? Hangunar is on October 9, which is today. Were you able to get that correct? Let's move on to our next question. When is Hangul officially introduced? Remember, this is not when it was first introduced, but when it was officially introduced. So what year was that? I'll give you 10 seconds for this too. Ready? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Were you able to get your answer? Hanguinar was officially introduced in 1446. Did you get that right? Make sure you write down how many you were able to get correct. For our next question, we have, what did King Sejong or Sejongtaewang call Hangul when he first created it? Ooh, let's see how well you do. Try not to go back in the video as you're doing this, but if you really do not remember, it's okay if you go back. But for this one, I'll give you 5 seconds. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Were you able to get this correct? When King Sejong first created Hangul, he actually didn't call it Hangul. He called the Korean language system Kagyagul. It is also known as Joseongul. Now let's try filling in the blank. Kagyagul had blank letters, but now Hangul has blank letters. Let's see how well you remember. I'll give you 5 seconds for this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Did you write down your answer? And did you get 28 and 24? If you did, good job! You were paying really close attention to our lesson today. Make sure you write down your answers as we go on. Now, let's see what is the name of the book Sejongdaewang wrote. This one is a little tricky because it was written really small on the screen. But are you able to choose the right one? I'll give you 10 seconds for this. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you said Hun Min Chong then you are correct. Good job everyone! 잘했어요. How many were you able to get correct? Make sure you tally it up and also let me know. Now how about we try writing about Hanguinar? Please go grab a paper and pencil or pen so we can write about Hanguinar to whoever we want to write it to. We can write it to your friend, you can write it to your parent, you can write it to your sibling if you want to. But in our writing, we're going to answer these 3 questions. When is 한글날? 한글날이 언제예요? Or 며칠이에요? Why do we celebrate it? 왜 한글날을 기념해요? And also a fun fact you learn about Hangul or 한글날 today. Using the example sentence to get you started on your writing, I want you to take some time, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, to write about 한글날. If you want, you can write more fun facts you learned about Hangul or 한글날 from what we have learned today. So why don't you take some time, pause this video, and get writing. I want you to also try drawing any illustration that goes along with 한글날. You can just write the Korean letters, the alphabet, or even someone with Hangul. Or you could also draw the king that you saw before. And once you're done, I want you to continue playing this video. That is it for our lesson today. I hope that you had an amazing time today, and I'll see you next week. Have a good weekend and happy Hanguinar!